Okay, today is October 14th, Wednesday, October 14th. This is CAD 214 MEP. We'll be discussing more electrical work today. The mod that we're going to be working on today is Mod 6, Electrical Part 2. I'm just going to read through what we're going to be doing today real quick and go over a couple of things from your drawings that I saw and then get started on today's work. Okay. So today we're going to talk about how to lay out lighting and how that's going to work. What you'll need to do for this mod is complete the lighting design using the following information. We're going to learn how to calculate lumens today. So we're going to calculate lumens per room using this following equation. I've got everything pretty much laid out for you on here. So you'll create the area of the room times foot candles. That equals lumens needed per room. The number that you'll use for foot candles on this particular equation will be 100, and we'll explain why shortly. The second part of the equation will be lumens per room, so the number that you created divided by lumens per lighting unit. That equals the number of actual lights that you will need. Lumens per unit, the number that you'll be using there is 10,000. Then you'll add the different lights to the rooms. We're going to use the plain recessed light, a 2x4, number 277. You'll also add lights to the hall using the downlight recessed can. You'll do one every 10 feet. We're going to add switches. Then we're going to create line types, and then we're going to add our electrical lines to connect all the lights and the switches together so we can have that running properly, and that'll be done on both floors. Once you do all that work, that'll be submitted by Saturday, and so that pretty much covers the work for today. Let me jump into Revit. I'm going to go ahead and stop my camera at the moment. Okay, so for the most part, everybody's drawings look really well, really good. I didn't see a lot of problems on most of them. There were a couple people that I think there was some confusion over the rules to lay out the outlets. This example that I have here on my screen, this is a good example of probably how many outlets we want to use per room. One of the things I would change on this particular one is maybe add a couple of outlets over here, even just one on each one of these walls, maybe one here, maybe one over here, two over here, just so there's outlets on every wall. It does get a bit frustrating when I was actually dog sitting for somebody this past day. I had to look for a place to plug in my laptop, and it was hard to find a place because it was an older house. So you can see if you have the opportunity to lay out more outlets, that's good. But there were some other examples that had maybe 7 outlets along this wall because they were doing literally one every 6 feet. And I think that's a guide for how to do it, but you don't necessarily have to. You don't necessarily have to add one every 6 feet. This example is really good. You also have to take into consideration what is the function of the room when you're laying out these outlets. If we had, for example, instructions on some of these rooms to say one was a lab, much like the lab that we have for this class, where we would need a lot of outlets, we could lay out more outlets. We could lay out some in the floors and things like that. If you were laying out an outlet for outlets for a kitchen, then you would take into consideration how high those outlets are going to be, probably 4 outlets. If you had in this area right here, if this was countertop space, maybe you'd even want to put 2 outlets closer together and then 2 here, 2 here. You definitely want to use more outlets where you think you're going to be using more appliances. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it when you start laying out outlets, but for the most part, everybody did a really good job. There are just a couple of things that I would maybe shift here and there. Maybe some of these outlets, instead of butting up right behind one another, we could maybe move one down so they're kind of catty corner like that. But what'll happen is when your electrician comes in here and starts laying out all the electrical boxes where these are going to go, these will probably go on either side of a 2x4. So the electrician will know you know, exactly where it's going to go. Now, it would be exactly like 6 foot from this wall to this wall. It might not be. It may be like maybe 5 foot 6 inches, but it gives them an idea of where you want these outlets to be set. Does that make sense? I know a couple of people had questions about maybe having too many outlets in the room. So if you've got a question about that now, let me know before we jump into the lighting information. Okay, those of you who think you have too many outlets, I've reviewed the drawings and you can go back and delete some of them, and that will help you make space for all the additional wirings, and that will help you connect all that wiring back to your electrical equipment, back to your panel board. So what we're going to do today is lighting. So let's jump into that again. I'm going to go back to here and just take a look at this. So if you reviewed this sheet, which we were supposed to, if you read through that, you have a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be doing today. And I've kind of spelled it out a little bit more thoroughly here to make it a little bit easier for you how we're going to do that. So, and the first thing that you're going to be doing, and I have it laid out just how you want to do it, is you're going to do the areas per room, so you can do the math on each one of these rooms to get that square footage. You can just use this measuring tool if you want. I think I've mentioned before how I like to use this one. It's just easy. So like if I measure from here to here, that's 10 feet. And from here to here, that's 20 feet. So 10 times 20 is 200. So you want to put this on a spreadsheet again, just like we did the other one before, like using Excel spreadsheet, so you can have that, use the room numbers. So just for this, the first floor stairwell, that's 200 square feet. Let me pull up a Word document. This might make it easier. Usually I write on the board at this time, and obviously it's a little awkward here. Where was I? All right. So when you read through this, you'll notice that lighting is determined by a couple of different ways that we can determine that. And once again, much like determining other types of power throughout the building, there's more than one way to do things. My cat keeps trying to sit on my computer, y'all. I'm sorry. So this is one type of calculation we use to create, use to create a lighting design. And this is, whoops, sorry. This is one of the charts that we use to create the lighting design. This is very geared towards residential, and I have people use this for when we do a residential lighting design. But just for this, since we're all doing commercial, we're all going to estimate that for the space that we need for, let me read this for you here. So let me read this. The lighting calculation example below is calculated by using the imperial system. If you're working in meters, simply exchange foot candles. Foot candles is what we're going to be using for meters. So we do a lighting calculation for that room. It's 10 by 12 foot kitchen, for example. The best lighting that we use for a small regular 10 by 12 foot kitchen is we need 20 to 50 foot candles. So we'll come up here. So we know that we have, from a basic kitchen lighting, 20 to 50 foot candles is what we would need to illuminate that space. For proper kitchen prep, we'd want to use more lumens. And then for difficult reading spaces, general workshop or fine detail work, we want to use one of these higher ones up here. This is where we get this number from right here, our foot candles, by what the space is going to be used for. So the next thing that we're going to do is come up with our area, which will be the 10 foot by 20 foot equals 200 square feet. That's our area. Next thing we want to do is calculate the number of lumens needed for that room. So we're going to take that area times the number of foot candles. So the area is 200 square feet. We're going to multiply that by 100 foot candles, because we're going to say that this space is used for like general workshop or difficult reading or writing. So we're going to use that top of the number, which will be 100, giving us the most lighting available. This would be for more finer detailed work. We're just going to say that this is a general use room, which is why we're staying at 100. So usually these numbers are given to you. Let's see, jump back to where I was. So that's 200 times 100. That equals 20,000. So that is, and then we'll take that lumens per room, which is the 20,000, and we will divide them by the number of lumens per lighting unit that we're going to use. The lumens per unit that we're using is 10,000. So once again, if we refer back to this, sorry, I got to jump back and forth on this. It is confusing, but hopefully y'all are following along. We're given that number based on this here. So it says for compact fluorescence, the illumination tends to be about 40 to 70 lumens per watt. And we also are using CFL. So for example, let's use a 20 watt CFL rated at 1200 lumens. So if I did, if I was going to use 20 watt CFLs in this room, which is not super strong light, and I was going to divide that by 1200 lumens. So it'd be 20,000 divided by 1200, which would mean I would need 16 20 watt bulbs just for this tiny little space right here. That seems excessive. That's why we're not going to be using 20 watt CFLs. We're using a larger type light, which the equivalent would be 10,000 lumens. So we're going to take the lumens per room, which is 20,000. We're going to divide that by 10,000. And that's going to equal 2. So this means that I only need 2 lights in that space. I need 2 10,000 lumen lights in this area. And that works out to this plain recessed light 2x4 277. So that's why we chose that one. So the math is really simple, but it's kind of awkward to explain it like this. So hopefully that makes sense. But if you just follow along with the basic information here, create the area, use 100 for foot candles. That gives you the lumens needed for the room. Take your lumens needed per room, divide it by 10,000, and that's going to give you the number of lights that you're going to need per room. And some lights, sometimes when you come up with this calculation, it's going to say you only want 3 lights. Well, we like to keep things kind of balanced and come in even numbers. So I would round that up to 4 lights. That way it kind of keeps things balanced. Let's see if we can find an example of that. But let me finish this one right here. So this room, per my calculation, has determined that I need 2 lights. So I'm going to go to my Systems tab. I'm going to go to my lighting fixture tool. At this time, I'm going to come over to my properties, and I'm going to do the drop down here, and I'm going to look for the one that I selected. This is a 1x4 foot light. We're looking at larger panels over here, so we're going to do 2x4 by 277, which is the one we're going to use. I want to make sure that I'm working in my ceiling plan level 1. When I make my ceiling plan level 1 active, you see that I have my ceiling grid available now. And that is set up at 2x4 inch grid, 2x4 foot grids. So when I come in over here, well, it's not letting me do anything. It's not letting me drop that light in because I need to change from place on vertical face to place on face. So now you see when I linger this over here in my space, I can drop these two lights into place. So I'll just put those two right there. So, and then I'll just go on to the next room and do the same thing. I'll do that same calculation again. So we have that as an example again. This one is 15, and I think it was 20 going this way, 15 by 20. Yes, 15 by 20. So 15 times 20 equals 300. I know that's times 100 for my workspace, and that's going to be divided by 10,000 for my lumens per unit. So this calculation is telling me I need 3 lights in this area. Well, that's going to look weird if I have like 1 light here, 1 light here, and 1 light here. It's not really going to evenly distribute the light, which is one of the things I want to think about as well. So I'm actually going to round up and do 4 in this space because it is kind of big. So at this time, I'm going to go back to my Systems tab, back to my lighting feature. Using the same light that we used last time, I'm going to go ahead and drop those in. I have to change to place on face. And I like to try and keep these lined up. On this one, since this is a different kind of space, I'm going to actually rotate this light so it's running along with the grid. So I'll highlight that, make it active, come up to my modified tab, use my rotate tool, rotate that 90 degrees. I'll move that in place. With that still active, I'll hit copy. I can copy another one over. I'll make both active. I'll hit copy again. And then I'll drag those down to there. So now I have 4 lights in that room. The light will be balanced. What I'll do when I get to it is when I add my device switch, much like I have at Delgado, I'll have a dimmer on that. So that way we can, instead of the lighting being excessive for a small room, we can dim it. When you have the option to add a dimmer switch, it's always nice. It costs a little bit more, but it does make a big difference as far as work in classrooms, especially if you've noticed that working on these computers at Delgado's classroom, sometimes just being able to dim that lights helps a lot on your eye strain and things like that. So that's another thing you want to think about when you're kind of laying out your design work. And dimmer switches are always a plus. So what you'll do is you'll continue working on your calculations and drop all these lights in here, continue along that way to finish those rooms, do your calculation and then lay out your lights. You can do all the calculations first and then go back and lay out the lights. It'll probably be easier to that, kind of group things like that. Next thing that we have on here is we're going to use down the hallway, we're going to use this downlight recessed can, and we're going to do them 1 every 10 feet. So for here, what I want to do for that is I'm going to go to my lighting fixtures. Here I'm going to go to load family. What did I say it was again? Recessed. Downlight recessed can. Downlight recessed can. There we go. Double click on that. Once again, I have to change this to place on face. And I'm going to drop those every 10 feet or so. Keeping them on the same plane. You'll want to check your measurements after this. Unfortunately for that, we don't have a temporary dimension that'll mark that for us, but you can go back and then get a measurement and just nudge that either way. If it's 1 or 2 inches off, we're not going to worry about it. You would just put a 10-foot dimension in there for your plans, and then the electrician would end up drop that every 10 feet. So then you can just run those lights around this way for the hall light. Next thing we want to do is we want to add our switches. So at this point, we're going to go to our device tool. Oops. I'll do the drop down on that for you. As we use the electrical feature before, we're going to go ahead and use the lighting one this time for our switches. We go over to our properties. We'll do the drop down here. You'll see we have a few different ones that we can select from. Single pole switch would be like if you only have one light and it turns off only on and off from one location. Three-way switch is if you can switch it off from 2 different locations. Four-way switch if you switch it off from 4 different locations. The most ones we're going to be using on here are your dimmer switch, your single pole, or your 3-way switch, and let's see what the difference is between those. So for this one in this hall, since this is for my lights in my staircase, that's probably going to be a 3-way switch because we'll have a switch up top and a switch down bottom. So we'll use this 3-way switch right here. And per there, you're going to have information per code that tells you exactly where these, what the measurements are going to be from the door to the switch itself. You find that in your code. But for here, we'll just use approximate like a foot. This will also be something that your electrician knows. So we have our 3-foot switch here, our 3-way switch here. And then when I go to my second floor, I want another 3-way switch in that same location on my second floor for the lighting, because the lighting switch will be for first and second floor. This would also be something that we would make a keynote out of, and it would explain why there's a 3-way switch here and we don't see it on the other side of it on this plan. They said the other side is located on the first floor and the second floor. So for this room right here, let's go back to device. Say we just have a single pole switch on this one. We can just drop that one right here. And in this room, it's quite a big room. It'll have probably at least 9 lights in it, I would think. I would probably use either, I'd probably use another 3-way switch in here. So here, I'll go ahead and use the device. I'll use my 3-way switch. And I'll put one over here and one over here. Sometimes when you're placing the 3-way switch or some of these other ones, you'll notice that if we do it on this side, if we had to place it over here, it looks upside down, which can be confusing on a set of plans. So you just press your space bar and that'll flip it. So if I was going to use the 3-way switch over here, if I placed it here, obviously upside down, I'm going to click on my space bar, and now I can place it right side up. So you can't rotate this, but when you use the space bar itself, it'll correct it so you can read it more easily. So you lay out all the switches for the rooms. Very straightforward there. I'll leave that design up to you. These are some clues how to do it right here. And then you can figure out the rest of it and just kind of play with it. Just, yeah, I have no doubt that y'all can, come up with a concept of how you want that laid out. Even if you wanted a switch over here and a switch over here, or in this room, maybe it's a more of a theatrical room that they're going to be using, and you wanted like a dimmer switch, you can use a dimmer switch on here as well. So I'm not actually telling you what type of switches to use in each room. That's up to your thought process behind each one. So that's it. Any questions do we have so far?
So on a north-south wall, the switch wouldn't be laying down, it'll be upright?
Correct. It's upright. It just looks like it on the floor plan because that's where it's indicating it right here. But if we jump to 3D Here you can see our switches are right here. So we click on that. That's our three-way light switch.
Okay.
And then we come out sideways. So they're not laying on the ground. That's just the way it looks on a plan view.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question.
Huh?
About as far, I think I'm probably one of the people who put too many outlets
Okay.
in their original plan. So you said you can just go back and delete some of them. How does that work as far as being on the circuit? Would that readjust them, or will it just be less on that particular circuit?
It should remove them all from that circuit. So if you delete that and say if you had like 10 on that circuit, now is the max, but now that you have too many in that room, you delete it down to 6. It should free up that space for those 3 remaining circuits, so you can readjust your circuit panels at that time.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to how to connect our wiring. So one of the things that we touched on briefly was how these plans are supposed to look. Let me pull that back up. So this is an example in your in Canvas right now that you have. So in here you see we've laid out our outlets, and we're going to be laying out our light fixtures. The next thing we're going to do is be connecting them with wires. We're going to be laying out these wires so we can see which lights go together and how they're set to one light switch or not. So we have our switch, we have our lights in place, then we'll have our switches in place, and then we're going to connect them all. So such as this light right here, this switch right here is connected to this light and this light. Same for this one, switches for here, here, and this one. So we're going to do the same with the ones that we have now. So let's go ahead and jump back into Revit. When we do that, we're going to be using a line type, but we need to create our line type first. This is something new that we haven't done yet. So we're going to go to our Manage tab. Okay. Manage tab. And we're going to go to Additional Settings, down to Line Styles, and we're going to create a new one. We'll just call this one Electric. If I can spell. And that's going to be a line. I have all the information laid out here that for you to change when you need it. Oh man, I closed it. So when you're creating your lines, you're going to use line projection number 4. We're going to make those red, and we're going to use line pattern dash 1/16. So how that looks is here, this is going to be our new line is electrical. Line projection, we're going to make a 4. Color, we're going to change to red. And line pattern is going to be dash 1/16. And we'll hit OK. And now we have that line type loaded. In order to draw those lines, we're going to go to our Annotate tab. We're going to go to our Detail Line tool. And over here, for line style, we're going to change from thin line to electrical, which we just created. I like to use the arc tool to create this because you want to have that bend, you want to have that arch in them. And for arch tool, I always prefer start end radius. So I'm going to start with this one. I'll start from the switch first. So from the switch, I want to go to this light. I'm just going to put a little arch in it like that. And then from this one, I'm going to go to this one and just put a little arch. And that just shows that these two lights are connected to this switch. And you can adjust this if you don't like the way it looks. I just like to make, for it to read easier. Sometimes you'll have to just, it just takes a little practice to make it look nice is what I'm trying to say. Let's do that again for this one over here. Once again, we're going to annotate tab, detail line. Let's start with this switch to this light. Oops, I forgot to change to an arc. Undo, undo, change to arc. Here to here, just a little band in it. I'll go from this one to this one. All right, and there we have that one laid out. So here we have 2 rooms already done. Let's go down to ceiling plan, and then for my lighting for the hallway, I'd want to do the same thing. I want to have that switch put in there on that one. We'll go to lighting. We'll use another 3-way switch. I'll place that, maybe one right here, and maybe one on the other end of the hall, right here. Actually, we'll probably do it right here. But it's up to you where you want to place those. So to start my electrical lines on here, I'm going to go to annotate, detail line, set to electrical. I want to pick start end radius arc. We start at this switch,